The night the king listened. Rain pressed softly against the mansion windows like cautious fingers. The old stone halls smelled of cedar, candle smoke, and something colder, like winter hiding inside the walls. Elias Dreven, the vampire king, stood alone in the dark library where even the clocks seemed afraid to tick too loudly. He wasn't the kind of king who needed to shout. His silence carried weight. People said he ruled the night because he had no heart left, because centuries of loss had turned him into a throne made of shadow. And maybe that was true, except for the one thing he kept locked away from everyone, a small brass locket he touched when he thought no one was watching. Tonight, the locket felt heavier than usual. Below the library, in the servants' quarters, a new employee moved through the corridor with careful steps. His name was Amir, hired only 3 weeks ago, and already he'd learned the rules. Don't look at the king too long, don't ask about the locked west wing, and never, ever enter the private garden after midnight. Amir broke the third rule without meaning to. It started with a sound, not a scream, not even a cry, just a thin, confused humming drifting through the hallway, the way a lost child might hum to stop themselves from feeling afraid. Amir paused at the bottom of the stairs, holding a folded blanket and a cup of warm milk he'd been bringing to the kitchen staff. The humming came again, and this time there were words, soft and shaky. "Is my husband home yet? He promised he'd bring oranges." Amir followed the voice with the kind of instinct kindness gives you. It led him to a door that wasn't fully closed, a door that shouldn't have been open at all. Behind it, candlelight flickered, and the air smelled like dried lavender and old books. Inside sat an elderly woman in a high-backed chair, wrapped in a shawl. Her silver hair was pinned in a neat twist, but her eyes wandered like they couldn't find the year she belonged to. She looked small in a room that had been built to intimidate. And when she saw Amir, her face brightened with relief so pure it made his throat tighten. "Finally," she whispered, reaching out a trembling hand. "You're late. The night gets strange when I'm alone." Amir didn't ask who she was. He didn't say, "You're in the wrong place." He simply stepped closer, lowered himself to her level, and offered the blanket like it was an honor. "I'm sorry," he said gently. "It's cold tonight. Here, let me help." She stared at him, blinking as if trying to remember a name. "Are you one of the guards?" "No, ma'am," Amir replied, careful with every word. "I'm just someone who didn't want you to be alone." The woman's fingers closed around his wrist with surprising strength. Fear flashed across her face, sudden and sharp. "Please," she whispered, voice breaking. "Don't tell him I wandered again. He gets so tired, and then he looks at me like he's losing me twice." Amir's heart sank. He, the king. In that moment, Amir understood something the mansion didn't talk about. The West Wing wasn't locked because it held treasure. It was locked because it held someone precious and fragile, and the king had been trying to protect her from the world and maybe from himself. Amir swallowed and nodded. "I won't tell anyone, but I'm going to stay with you for a little while, okay?" She relaxed like a storm passing. Then her eyes drifted to the warm milk in Amir's hands. "Milk," she said, smiling. "My boy loved milk when he was small. He used to spill it and laugh, and I'd pretend to be angry just so he'd hug me." Amir chuckled before he could stop himself. "That sounds like a dangerous baby." She giggled, an unexpectedly bright sound in a house full of shadows. "Oh, he was. A terrible, sweet child." Amir poured the milk carefully into a cup and helped her drink. His movements were patient, practiced. He'd done this before, back when his own mother's Alzheimer's had begun stealing the map of her mind. He remembered the late-night confusion, the fear behind familiar eyes, the way the strongest thing you could do was stay calm and loving when everything felt unfair. So when the woman's hands started shaking, he didn't panic. He placed his palm over hers, steady and warm. "It's okay," he murmured. "You're safe, I'm right here." Above them, in the shadows of the doorway, A presence gathered like a silent storm. Elias Dreven had been drawn by the humming too. He stood perfectly still, his cloak blending into the darkness, his face unreadable, until Amir said the words, "I'm right here." Because those were the same words Elias used to whisper to this woman centuries ago, before time started taking her away. The king watched Amir tuck the blanket around her shoulders with careful tenderness. He watched Amir smile when she forgot what day it was and repeat himself without irritation. He watched him treat her not like a secret, not like a problem, but like a person deserving dignity. Something in Elias tightened, unfamiliar and painful, like a door in his chest trying to open after 100 years of being nailed shut. The woman looked past Amir suddenly, eyes widening toward the darkness. "Oh," she said softly, voice full of wonder. "There you are, my son, you came back." Amir turned, confused, and followed her gaze. The candlelight trembled. Elias stepped forward into the glow, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. His eyes were not cruel the way rumors promised. They were tired, and beneath the tiredness, there was a fear that didn't belong to a king. Amir stood up slowly, placing himself just slightly between the woman and the doorway without even realizing he was doing it. Not to challenge the king, just to protect her, the same way he'd protected his own mother when strangers got impatient. Elias noticed that small movement. A dangerous silence filled the room, heavy with power and heartbreak. The king's gaze dropped to Amir's hand, still resting gently on the old woman's trembling fingers. Then Elias looked up at Amir, voice low enough to be almost kind. "Who gave you permission," the king asked, "to touch my mother?" Amir's mouth went dry. He could feel the weight of the mansion pressing in, the rules, the fear. But the woman's hand tightened around his like an anchor. Amir forced himself to speak. "No one did, Your Majesty. She was scared, and she shouldn't be alone." For the first time, Elias Dreven's expression cracked, not with anger, but with something far more dangerous. Pain. Because the king had tried everything, locks, servants, silence, to keep his mother safe. And yet a stranger had done in 5 minutes what his power couldn't do. He had made her feel calm. Elias took one step closer. The candle flame bent toward him as if the air itself respected his sorrow. Amir didn't move back. And the old woman, smiling like the night, was suddenly warm, lifted Amir's hand, and pressed it to her cheek as if he were family. Elias froze, staring at the gesture like it was a wound reopening. Then, in a voice that sounded too human to belong to a legend, the vampire king whispered, almost to himself, "She remembers you." And as his eyes darkened with a decision Amir couldn't read, the door behind Elias slowly shut on its own, clicking into place like a lock. Amir realized, too late, that he was now alone in the West Wing with the most feared king in the world, and the one person the king loved enough to become dangerous. Part 1 ends there, because Elias lifted his hand toward Amir, not enraged, but as if he was about to make a choice that would change all 3 of their lives. The king's rule, the workers' promise. The room stayed still, but the air didn't. It felt charged, like a storm deciding where to strike. Candlelight leaned and shivered as Elias held his hand in the space between them, not touching Amir, not yet lowering it either. Amir stood his ground even though his legs begged him to step back. He could hear his own heartbeat, loud and childish in a mansion built for immortal silence. The elderly woman, Elias' mother, kept smiling up at Amir as if he were someone she'd known all her life, and that small, innocent trust made the moment sharper. Amir wasn't afraid of the king's power as much as he was afraid of what the king might do to protect what he loved. Elias' eyes moved from Amir to his mother. His voice softened, but it didn't lose its authority. "Mother," he said gently, "do you know who this is?" She squinted like the question was far away. "It's the nice boy from the market," she answered, pleased with herself. Then she leaned closer to Amir and whispered loudly, the way people do when they don't realize they're being loud. "He doesn't charge me extra." Amir blinked, surprised, and a nervous laugh slipped out before he could swallow it. It wasn't the smartest sound to make in front of a vampire king, but it was honest. The woman giggled too, delighted by the shared secret. Something strange happened then. Elias didn't punish the laughter. He watched it, like he'd forgotten what it looked like when a room didn't fear him. Amir cleared his throat, careful. "Your Majesty," she was cold and confused. "I didn't come here to break rules. He stopped, because the truth sounded simple enough to get him killed or forgiven, depending on what kind of King Elias really was. "I just didn't want her to feel alone." The king lowered his hand slowly. The tension didn't disappear, but it changed shape, less like a blade, more like a wound being inspected. "You have someone," Elias said, as if tasting the idea. "In your life, someone who was once strong and now needs your patience." Amir's eyes dropped. He hadn't told anyone here about his mother. The staff barely spoke to each other, and the king was supposed to be distant, untouchable. Yet somehow he had guessed it, like grief recognized its own reflection. "My mother," Amir admitted. "Back home, Alzheimer's." He forced himself to meet Elia's gaze. "When she forgot my name, I learned it wasn't her being cruel, it was her being lost. And when someone is lost, you don't punish them for not knowing the way." Elias stared at him, expression tight. In the candlelight, he looked less like a legend and more like a man carrying a weight that never set down. Then the elderly woman reached for Elias, fumbling like her arms weren't sure where to go. "Eli," she said, voice small. "Come sit. You're always standing like you're guarding a door." The name, short, affectionate, hit the room like a memory you didn't mean to touch. Elias didn't move right away. Amir expected him to refuse, to retreat into dignity. But slowly, stiffly, the king crossed the space and knelt beside her chair. Not like a ruler taking a knee, like a son trying to remember how. She patted his hair with trembling fingers. "There," she murmured. "Better, you used to do this when you had bad dreams." Elias closed his eyes for one brief second, and Amir saw the truth. The king wasn't afraid of enemies. He was afraid of moments like this, because they proved he still had a heart that could break. The mother turned to Amir again, bright and serious. "You should eat," she told him. "You're too thin. My Eli forgets to feed his guests." Elias opened his eyes, and a humorless huff escaped him. Almost a laugh, almost a sigh. "She believes you are a guest," he said to Amir, voice low. "That is new." Amir's lips curved despite himself. "Then I guess I'm honored." For a second, the mood softened so much it felt dangerous. Amir almost forgot the locked door behind him, the rules he'd broken, the power in the king's stillness. Almost. Then the mother's expression shifted. Her gaze drifted past them, toward the corner of the room, where shadows collected like pooled ink. "Who's that man?" she asked suddenly, pointing with a trembling finger. "The one waiting by the stairs." Amir turned fast. There was no man, only drapes, only darkness. But Elia's posture changed instantly, like a blade sliding from a sheath without a sound. His eyes tracked something Amir couldn't see, and the temperature in the room dipped. "No one is there," Elias said quickly, too quickly, trying to soothe her. Yet the words sounded like they were meant for himself as much as for her. The mother's breathing shortened. "He keeps coming," she whispered. "He asks me to follow him. He says you can't stop him." Amir's stomach tightened. Hallucinations, he thought. This was how it could happen. His own mother once insisted there was a train in the living room and cried because she missed her ticket. You couldn't argue with the fear. You could only meet it with calm. Amir stepped closer and spoke softly. "Ma'am, can you look at me? Just me. Tell me what you can feel." She blinked, struggling, and finally focused on Amir's face. Warm, she whispered. Your hands are warm. That's good, Amir said. Hold on to that. If you feel warm, you're here, you're safe. Elias watched, frozen. Amir could sense it. The king wanted to help, but he didn't know how, not without turning it into control, not without using power like a bandage that always tore skin off when you pulled it away. The mother grabbed Amir's wrist again. Don't leave, she pleaded, suddenly terrified. If you leave, I'll forget where I am, and then the man will take me downstairs. Amir's throat tightened. He glanced at Elias. She needs someone with her, someone consistent. Elias' jaw flexed. I am with her. But are you with her? Amir said carefully, not accusing, just honest. Or are you only guarding her? The question landed hard. Elias' eyes narrowed, not in threat, but in pain. Amir lowered his voice. My mother didn't need locks. She needed patience. She needed someone to sit through the same story 10 times and still act like it mattered the first time. Elias looked down at his mother's fragile hands, at the way they searched the air like they were trying to find the past. When he spoke again, it was quieter. She remembers you, he said. That is not coincidence. Amir swallowed. Sometimes people remember feelings more than faces. The mother smiled faintly, as if she'd caught the end of a song. You're kind, she told Amir. Then she looked at Elias with sudden sternness, like a mother who didn't forget how to scold. And you, stop looking like thunder. He's helping. Amir expected Elias to snap back, to demand respect. Instead, the king's shoulders dropped a fraction, as though the scolding had reached a place no one else could touch. You will stay, Elias said to Amir at last. It wasn't a request, it was a decree. Amir's pulse kicked. Stay tonight. Elias shook his head once. You will stay as her attendant, in this wing, under my protection. His voice tightened on the last words, like protection was a promise he was no longer sure he deserved to make. You will not speak of her to the staff. You will not leave this place without my permission. And if you harm her... I won't, Amir cut in too fast, then he softened. I won't, I promise. The mother relaxed again, soothed by the certainty in Amir's voice. She reached up and touched Elia's cheek with a tenderness that made the king go still. My boy, she whispered, don't punish the kind ones. The world already does that. Elias closed his eyes. When he opened them, there was something new there, an emotion that looked like hope wearing a mask so it wouldn't be recognized. Then you will prove your kindness, Elias said to Amir. You will help her, and you will help me learn how. Amir nodded, though his mind spun. An attendant in the West Wing meant isolation. It meant the king watching him. It meant living beside secrets. It also meant this woman wouldn't be alone. Elias rose to his full height, the room bending around him like it remembered who ruled here. He moved toward the door as if to leave, then paused, his back still turned. There is one more rule, he said quietly. Amir held his breath. Elias spoke like someone confessing a shame. If she asks for the oranges, you must tell her yes, even when the answer is no. Amir's chest tightened. He understood immediately. Oranges weren't fruit. Oranges were a promise from someone who never came back. Oranges were the last thread keeping her anchored to a life before forgetting. Amir nodded slowly. I can do that. The mother beamed, satisfied. Good, she said. Now tell the funny story again. Amir blinked. Funny story. She pointed at him, delighted. The one where you spilled the milk. Amir opened his mouth, lost, then realized she wasn't asking for truth. She was asking for comfort, so he tried. Well, he began, glancing at Elias. Once there was a very brave cup of milk. The mother laughed, bright and real. Even Elias' lips twitched, almost against his will, like the humor had slipped past his defenses. And then, just as Amir started to believe the night might soften, the mother's laughter stopped mid-breath. Her eyes widened again, fixed on the same dark corner. "He's here," she whispered, voice trembling. "The man by the stairs, he says he knows what you are." Elia's went rigid, and his gaze snapped to the shadows with a fury so controlled it was terrifying. Amir felt the locked door behind them, the sealed wing, the mansion's silence, and in that moment he understood. Whether the man was real or not, something was coming for this family, something old enough to frighten a vampire king. Elias spoke, without looking away from the darkness. "Amir," he said, voice like ice over fire, "do not move, do not speak, and whatever you hear next, do not open the door." The candle flames leaned hard to one side, as if a wind had entered the room. And from the other side of the locked door, a slow, polite knock began, measured, patient, as though whoever stood there already knew they would eventually be let in. The door, the promise, and the dawn. The knocking didn't hurry. It was calm, almost respectful, which made it worse. Amir's skin prickled as if the sound carried a cold intelligence, something that understood fear and knew exactly how to milk it. Elias didn't move, but the room seemed to tighten around him. Even the candle flames shrank as if they wanted to hide. Amir could feel the king's control in the air, quiet, disciplined, yet underneath it there was a tremor, not terror for himself. Terror for his mother. The elderly woman clutched Amir's sleeve. Her eyes searched his face like it was the last familiar thing in a dream turning dark. "Don't let him take me downstairs," she whispered. "Please, I can't find my way back up." Amir swallowed hard and nodded, putting his hand over hers again. "I won't," he murmured, voice low and steady. "You're staying right here with me." The knocking came again. Elias finally spoke, not raising his voice, not breaking his calm. "You are not welcome in this wing," he called toward the door. "Leave." A pause. Then a man's voice answered through the wood, smooth, warm, almost friendly, like a neighbor asking for sugar. "Your Majesty," the voice said, "I'm only here to return what was borrowed, a memory, a name, a truth." Amir's stomach turned. He glanced at Elias, but the king's face had gone unreadable, stone over deep water. "No one is borrowing from you," Elias replied. The voice chuckled softly. "Ah, still trying to win by pretending you cannot lose." The mother flinched at the chuckle, as if it belonged to someone she once knew and didn't want to remember. Her fingers tightened on Amir's sleeve. "He's rude," she muttered, half angry, half scared. Amir almost smiled at that, until Elias' eyes flashed toward him, a warning, not fear him. More like, "Be careful, this is not a normal visitor." The voice on the other side continued, sweeter than it should have been. "Open the door, Elias. I don't need to hurt anyone. I only want to speak to her." "No," Elias said instantly. A sigh from outside. "You keep her behind locks like a jewel in a box, but jewels suffocate too." Amir's heart pounded. He knew what this sounded like, a person who believed they were right, the most dangerous kind of calm. The mother leaned forward in her chair, squinting at the door. "Is it the doctor?" she asked, confused. Elia's jaw tightened. Amir felt a sudden ache for him, an immortal king, brought to his knees not by armies but by a disease he couldn't command. Amir made a decision before he could talk himself out of it. Slowly, he shifted his body so he was between the mother and the door, like a shield made of warm hands and stubborn courage. He spoke loudly enough to carry. "She's resting. If you have something to say it to me." Silence. Then the voice replied, amused. "You must be the new one, the warm-handed hero." Amir's throat went dry, but he forced himself to hold the line. "I'm just an employee." A soft laugh. "Kindness suits you. It also makes you predictable." Elias turned his head slightly, eyes narrowing at Amir, not in anger, more like urgent disbelief. Amir could almost hear him thinking, "Why would you offer yourself? You barely know us." But Amir did know something. He knew what it was to love someone whose mind was slipping away. He knew the helpless rage of wanting to fix the unfixable. And he knew that when fear took over a room, someone had to be the calm thing in the center. The voice outside lowered, becoming intimate. Open the door and I will give her clarity for 1 hour. 1 hour where she remembers everything. Your name, her home, her life. The mother's head jerked up, her eyes sharpened with sudden longing like thirst. Clarity, she whispered. Eli, did you hear that? I could remember. Amir's breath caught. He could feel Elia's freeze. The offer was poison wrapped like medicine. Elia's voice went rough. Do not tempt her. But the mother was already drifting toward hope, and hope can be cruel when it's offered to the desperate. She looked at Elia's with a childlike pleading that shattered Amir's chest. Just for a little, she begged. I want to remember you properly. I want to see you. I'm so tired of losing the world. Elias stared at her as if someone had pressed a blade into his ribs. His hands curled at his sides, fighting the urge to reach for the door, to accept any bargain that might give her peace. Amir saw the king's hidden compassion right there, raw, enormous, dangerous. Elias would sacrifice anything for her, even himself. Amir stepped closer to the mother and lowered his voice, making it gentle, like a bedtime story. Ma'am, he said, can I tell you something? She blinked. Yes, sweetheart. My mother used to have days where she remembered everything, Amir continued. They came suddenly, like sunlight through clouds, and they were beautiful, but they also hurt, because when the sunlight left, the darkness felt worse. The mother's eyes softened. Did she suffer? Amir nodded once, forcing honesty into the room. She suffered most when she thought she was a burden, when she thought love had turned into a chore. The best days were not when she remembered names. The best days were when she felt safe. The mother's breathing slowed. Her grip on Amir loosened just a little. Amir turned his gaze to Elias then, letting the king see him fully. Your Majesty, he said, quiet but firm. If that man can give her an hour of memory, he can take something back. People like that always do. Elias' eyes flickered, anger, gratitude, fear, all tangled. And if she asks, Elias whispered, voice tight, do I deny her? Amir's voice softened. You don't deny her hope, you give her a different kind. Outside, the voice turned colder. Touching, very touching, but you are not family, boy, you don't get a vote. Amir flinched at the word boy, the way it tried to shrink him. Elias' gaze hardened instantly, like a storm finally choosing its direction. You are correct, Elias said, voice low. He does not get a vote. Amir's stomach dropped. Then Elias continued, and the room seemed to inhale. He gets a choice. Elias stepped beside Amir, not behind him, shoulder to shoulder. King and employee, equal in one sacred purpose, protect her peace. Elias' presence felt like night itself standing guard, but there was warmth in it now, a quiet respect. The voice outside went still. Interesting, it murmured. The king learns humility. Elias leaned closer to the door, eyes half-lidded, voice steady. State your true intent. A pause. Then the truth slipped through the wood like smoke. I want her, the voice said simply. Not to hurt her, to use her. The mother's face crumpled with sudden understanding even through her fog. Use me, she whispered, offended in a way that was almost funny. For what? I can't even find my slippers. Amir let out a startled breath that almost became a laugh. Even Elias' mouth twitched again, brief, unwilling. The voice ignored her. Your bloodline is old, Elias. Her mind is open, unprotected. Through her, I can enter what you have sealed away, the grief you hide, the vow you made, the location of the locket. Amir's eyes widened. The locket, the one thing Elias touched when he thought no one was watching. Elias went perfectly still. The temperature dropped again, not with anger, but with a kind of sacred warning. "You will not speak of that," Elias said. "Oh, but I will," the voice purred. "Because you cannot fight me without revealing it. You cannot save her without surrendering it. Such a delicious trap." Amir's mind raced. This wasn't about the mother alone. It was about leverage. The enemy, whoever he was, had discovered the most human weakness in an immortal king: love. The mother frowned at the door. "You're a bully," she announced, suddenly clear in her tone even if not in her memory. She jabbed a finger at the air as if scolding a misbehaving child. "My Eli doesn't like bullies." Amir swallowed a lump in his throat. "She's right," he murmured. Elia's eyes softened as he looked at her, and in that softness Amir saw the king's true crown. Not power, but devotion. Elias crouched in front of his mother, taking her hands gently. "Mother," he said, voice careful, "do you trust me?" She studied him. For a heartbeat, her eyes sharpened, almost fully present. "I do," she said, "even when you look like thunder." Elias exhaled, shaking. "Then trust me now. Do not listen to him. Listen to me." She nodded slowly. Elias stood. Then, to Amir's shock, he turned and placed the brass locket into Amir's hand. It was warm, like it had been held 1,000 times. Amir stared at it. "Your Majesty." "Hide it," Elias said quietly. "On you, he cannot take what he cannot find." Amir's fingers closed around it. The metal felt heavy with history, with sorrow, with love. "I'll protect it," he whispered. Elias' gaze held his, fierce and grateful. "I know." And then Elias did something Amir would remember forever. The vampire king bowed his head, just slightly, in a gesture that wasn't royal at all. It was humility. Outside, the voice changed, losing its patience. "Enough! Open the door or watch her suffer confusion until she forgets you entirely. Watch her call you a stranger." The mother's lip trembled. Amir felt her fear rise again, but he squeezed her hands. "Look at me," Amir told her. "Tell me what you feel." "Warm," she whispered. "That's real," Amir said. "That's yours. Nobody can bargain for that." Elias lifted his chin toward the door. His voice was low, controlled, but it carried like a vow. "You will leave," he said, "because tonight I learned something I should have learned centuries ago." The voice outside sneered. "And what is that?" Elias glanced at Amir, and then at his mother, like the answer lived in them. "That love is not a lock," Elias said. "It is a presence." Amir's throat tightened. Elias continued, voice steady. "You cannot enter this room through her confusion, because you will find no secret worse than what I am willing to admit." Silence. Then Amir realized what Elias was doing. He wasn't fighting with threats. He was disarming the attacker by refusing shame, refusing to hide, refusing to be controlled by what he feared losing. Elias spoke again, softer now, like he was speaking to himself as much as to the enemy. "Yes, I am afraid. Yes, I am grieving. Yes, I cannot heal her mind." The mother looked up at him, eyes shining. Amir felt the emotional shift like dawn starting behind clouds. Elia's voice turned firm. "But I can sit with her. I can learn to laugh when she laughs. I can accept help from a human with warm hands and brave honesty." The voice outside didn't answer immediately. When it did, it sounded smaller, irritated, as if the trap had failed. "You think humility makes you strong." Elia's reply was quiet and absolute. "It makes me free." A long pause followed. Then the pressure in the air began to lift, as though whatever stood beyond the door was stepping back, recalculating. Amir held his breath, listening. Footsteps slow, retreating, moved away down the corridor. The mansion seemed to exhale, wood and stone settling back into themselves. The mother sagged with relief, and then, as if her body remembered it was tired, her eyelids drooped. Amir guided her gently back into the chair, adjusting the shawl around her shoulders. "There," he whispered. "You did great." She smiled faintly. "Did I?" Then she peered at Amir with sudden mischief. "You still owe me the oranges." Amir's eyes stung. He forced a small smile. "Yes, ma'am, the sweetest oranges." Elias turned away for a moment, and Amir saw his shoulders shake once. Just once. Like a man trying not to cry in front of someone he needed to be strong for. When Elias faced them again, his voice was low. "Thank you," he said to Amir. 2 words, but they sounded like a century of loneliness admitting it needed company. Amir nodded, clutching the locket beneath his shirt. "She's not a burden," he said. "She's your mother." Elias' gaze fell to his mother's sleeping face. The fear in him didn't disappear, but something steadier took its place. "I have ruled nations," Elias murmured, "and yet I have not known how to sit and simply be." Amir answered gently, "You can learn." Elias gave a small, almost embarrassed exhale, half laugh, half surrender. "Then I will." The first hint of dawn began to pale the edge of the sky beyond the curtains, soft and gray-blue. The mansion looked less like a fortress and more like a home that had been waiting a long time for warmth to return. Elias stepped closer to the chair and placed his hand lightly over his mother's, just resting there. No chains, no commands, just presence. Then, in a voice so quiet it felt like a secret, the mother spoke in her sleep. "Eli," she whispered, "don't be alone anymore." Elias' eyes closed. When he opened them, they shone with something Amir had never expected to see in a vampire king. "Hope." He looked at Amir. "You will stay," he said, but this time it wasn't a decree. It was an invitation. Not as a prisoner, as family if you choose it. Amir's chest tightened. He thought of his own mother far away, of how love could stretch across distance, across species, across fear. He nodded. "I choose it." Elias' gaze shifted to the door, to the corridor beyond where the footsteps had retreated. "Then we have work to do," the king said, voice calm, eyes sharp again, but not cold. "Because he will return, and next time he will not knock." Amir gripped the hidden locket and felt its warmth like a promise. Outside, the dawn brightened, but somewhere deep in the mansion, a single floorboard creaked as if someone had stopped walking and started listening. And Amir realized the enemy might not have left at all.